Hello everyone, my name is Foka and I'm joined here by unique spiritual practitioner. His name is Uriel Yariv, he's a Tantra and Yoga teacher in the Mahasiddha school in Thailand and part of the Atman Federation. And he's coming the end of April to offer a workshop in Tara about the wisdom of emotion. And he has a lot of experience with emotions. He's an emotional character. And he has masters in psychology, dealing with people's emotions. And first of all, thank you for joining us, Uriel.
Hi.
And
nice to be here.
First and foremost, what are exactly emotions? What are their emotions? What are their purpose? What is their mechanism? How do they work? In general lines, I know it's a big question, but in big lines.
There's a definition. There's a department in Zurich University. They have a special department for investigating emotions, and they define it there as a preparation for action. So it's like the human being has a few modes of being. When something is risky, then we will enter either the fear mode, one set of emotions, or the courage mode. When something is risky or dangerous for a very long stretch of time, then we will enter the worry mode or the anxiety mode, which is a kind of automatic response of the body aiming to adapt, and so that we invest, the resources. We all know of this flight or fight and rest and digest kind of situation. So in a conflict, the body would enter a state of anger and the mind would enter anger, so that we can respond best to the situation. So the body, but actually we know also all the energy structures and the mind as such, they have different modes of being, and these different modes of being which aim to adapt or to respond to the perceivable situation. It doesn't have to be the actual situation, but to the perceivable situation. The ways of being these ways of being are what we call emotions. Yeah. So being happy or being sad, being anxious or being angry is in its essence, in its original form, is extracting or taking from ourselves the part which is most suitable to respond to the coming situation.
So taking from what you just said, often they have the feeling that emotions overwhelm you. And also, as you mentioned, they are unconscious, they are way in which we interact, and then they influence us in that way. So basically, what is the right way of handling emotions, or alchemizing emotions is often said? I mean, what is exactly the emotional wisdom that you refer to? Because from what you said, it seems like they just happen.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, the process, and for most people the process of dealing with emotions, is automatic and unconscious and unadaptable. It's not an actual suitable response, right? If you have a clinical depression or a clinical anxiety, if you go to like really bad cases, and we went through, when in the qualification as a psychologist, you see people that have super unadaptable reactions, people that are white, and lifeless with depression, or completely shattered and deprived through anxiety, or people that dwell in guilt and can't function, right? So basically, that response mechanism of emotion is normally unconscious, and it is automatic and unadaptable. So we have like an AI, if you may, inside, which, okay, the life enters this particular crisis, so I should be super angry. Yeah. But then on top of that anger, we have a social conventions that the anger cannot be expressed. So the anger stays inside, unexpressed, and kills us from the inside. Or the mechanisms of fear and anxiety. If you were to sleep among all your friends, all your tribe, yeah, somewhere in the forest where you always sleep and it's safe, you would have a good long night's sleep. But then if, let's say, if you go from your hunters and gatherers group and you go and travel the forest and you sleep alone, it's good that you are anxious. And it's good that you don't sleep very well, because there's less chance that you'll be eaten, right? But that, unconscious and approximate reaction of, okay, if I am sleeping alone and I feel socially abandoned, then I shouldn't sleep well. It doesn't fit when you sleep in your house, right? There's no reason to be anxious over there. So the wisdom of emotions begins by taking the conscious control, reclaiming the control over the emotions, and it starts by becoming truly aware of them and understanding. So you take your anxiety and you dive into it. You become very conscious of the anxiety itself, and gradually you become free from it. Gradually you understand, okay, I'm a little lonely, okay, I have some bills to pay, but there's no reason to be that anxious. Yeah, you embrace it, you understand it, and there is no need to be anxious in that way. And therefore, the anxiety would subside. Yeah. So the idea is to turn the emotions from something very unconscious, very automatic, into something that is consciously embraced and given a direction so that they fulfill their role and they're actually adaptive. The thing about emotions is that they have a tremendous momentum of their own. You just try to tell an anxious person, stop being anxious. A depressive person, stop being sad. They can't, right? So the wisdom of emotions and the process of emotional healing begins with a certain surfacing, with a certain embracing of the emotion itself. And by really holding that emotion in our consciousness, we gradually gain hold of it, and it becomes something that we can play with. If you take sadness, for example, when people try to push away sadness and suppress their sadness, because there's some people that indulge in sadness. You get sad and then it's all about me, and I'm so sad, and everybody you meet, you have to tell them how sad you are. When you have a moment for yourself, you think, oh, I'm so sad. Makes me so special that I'm sad. Nobody is sad like me. In the Holocaust, they suffered physically, but I suffer emotionally. They didn't know what suffering means. There's the indulgent into the sadness, or there is the suppressing of sadness. There's people that would never confess that they are sad, but you see it. You see in their eyes how much sorrow they carry, and maybe they have a fake smile, maybe they have a fake I'm efficient, I'm going to do something in my life. Maybe they have all sorts of things, but you can see there are a lot of suppressed sadness. Now, both of these reactions are not adaptable, and they don't help, nor the indulgence nor the suppression. But if you really look at sadness, and this is what we're going to do in the workshop, sadness has a few components. It can be broken down into a few components. And once we understand the different components of sadness, we know what component in the sadness needs to be embraced. Because you're sad, because you're longing for something, right? There is a longing, and that's very good to embrace. If you suppress sadness, you suppress your longing, and you will live very superficially. But there's also a despair. There's a lack of hope in sadness. And that lack of hope, you don't need to say yes to. You don't need to feed it. And if you play with the emotion correctly and you understand its structure, then you can take an attitude which embraces the positive core which exists in every emotion. You're afraid because the fear has a positive core. You want to maintain what is good. That's why you're afraid. The anger has a good core because you want to correct what is wrong. Otherwise you wouldn't be angry. So emotional wisdom entails embracing the positive element of every emotion and discarding, not feeding, not subordinating. You don't fight the negative ingredient. You can evoke the opposite, but for sure you don't feed it. And once the attitude towards the emotion is not just like, okay, this is a label, this is sadness, I push it away or I indulge in it, but it's broken into its components, then you can extract the positive, and that's the attitude of Tantra, right? You extract the positive from everything, and you let go of the shell, you let go of the wrapping paper, you let go of the garbage there, and you just take the essence. So this is somehow the mental ingredient of emotional healing and emotional wisdom. There's another. We can take another question. I can share more about that.
Just here with this subcomponents. So we can say that by the conscious fusion with the emotions, one is able to depict the subcomponents, and then through power of discernment, through a meditative, contemplative process, one will be able to depict which is the aspects which are beneficial. One can say they spring from a deeper place within, I would agree, and then the other aspects which are more of a collective subconscious. What is the, let's put it a bit clear, what is the second part? I mean, you said, okay, there's a valuable part. Where does the non-valuable part comes from? What's the source of that? Because that the first one also, you can tell us where does it come from, that valuable subcomponent, and where is the non-valuable one, or the one that we wish to discard.
Yeah. So the valuable part comes from our very essence. You see, we have an essential part of our being, a soul, if you want to use the spiritual terminology, a healthy self, if you want to use some of the psychological terminology. And on top of it, there is like a pseudo I, a superficial I, which is, it is created by a certain copying of others, copying of social norms, from mental agitation. You see, if I look at my anger, so, if I look at how I express anger, bits and pieces of it, and when I was young, big chunks of it, were very similar to how our father expresses anger. It's very, very similar. And for many people, it's like you download the whole app from someone else. Download the app of anger from your father, the app of sadness from your mother, or you make like a collage. You take a little bit from your brother, a little bit from your friends, a little bit from television, from your favorite superhero or pop star, or from your favorite book. And downloading all these things, it becomes, this is how I react when I'm pissed off. This is how I react when I'm in front of loss. This is how I react when things are scary. You just copy paste it without much discernment. And then that copying remains there like a kind of reactive, unexamined leech. Some people suffer from guilt all their lives, and the superficial part, the negative part, it comes because it is unexamined. It is not checked. We are not aware of it. And somehow the awareness begins very, very much with the body. The movement of or the beginning of the movement of the emotional healing and of the emotional wisdom begins by coming from the verbal, superficial side of the emotion into the emotion here and now in the body. How do you know when you're sad? How do you know when you're angry? How do you know when you're afraid? It doesn't come there on your phone app telling you, Foka, you're afraid, Foka, you're angry. You know it because there is a sensation in the body. But the sensation in the body, it flashes in our conscious mind only for a second or a split second. And then the labels begin. Oh, I'm angry, I shouldn't be angry now. Oh, I'm sad, I gotta give a lecture, I can't be sad now. I have a meeting with people, I can't be sad now. Or I'm sad, okay, let me do something about this sadness. And then we meet the concept, we meet the word sadness, we meet the word anger, we meet the word fear, not the thing. And the word is not the thing. The thing is in the body. And the thing pulsates. So if you look at any emotions, and you can just check your body now, if you look at any emotion, it pulsates in the body. When we are sad, we would feel it in the heart, in the throat, like a choking sensation in the throat, like a pain, like a weight, like a pressure in the heart. When we are angry, we'll feel it in the belly, we'll feel it in the jaw. We'll feel it in one way. When we are afraid, in the belly, in the pelvic area for some. And that sensation is real, is happening now. And if you want to deal with the emotions productively, we need to move from labels, which are a very rough and imprecise approximation of the emotion, into the conscious experience of the emotion here and now, beginning with how it vibrates in the body, because it's a constant, or it's a repeated pulsation, any kind of emotion. And if you look at the pulsation and you have the correct conceptualization, the ingredients, the subcomponents of any emotions, with that you have something which is actual to work with. And from there, yes, indeed, you can extract. You can allow the emotion to be as it is, and you can extract the positive components and give them life, and somehow solve, or rather integrate, the disharmonious components in consciousness, in awareness, until they find their place. You don't need to fight the negative sides. You just need to put them in the right place.
So, taking from what you said, it's an aspect of infusing the human psychology, and specifically the psychosomatic behavior or the influence in the body, and then shining the light of awareness. So what you're describing, and maybe you can detail a bit more, is the way spiritual wisdom and generally spirituality is infusing the psychology. So in your experience as a psychologist, in what way have you managed to bind those two worlds?
So this has been my life. I've been studying psychology since I was 19 or something. I'm 43. So this has been my life for the past 20 something years. And on the other side, spirituality for the past 20 something, 22 years or so, and particularly many years in silence and in retreat and by myself. And the work that I've done with others, it's a consequence of the work that I've done by myself, and how I experimented both the principles of spirituality, the meditations, the yoga, breathing exercises, and prayer, and so forth, and all the elements of psychology, that I studied there in university, and how to, or let's say it started by bringing these two together to deal with the life crisis, or with the difficulties, and also with the wonderful things in life. And somehow having this very, very intense periods in silence, literally a few years if you put all the periods together in silence, and having all the things that rise when you are alone for several weeks or for a month, having all these things that rise over there with all their intensity, that serves somehow as the basis, both of my work with clients and both of with this workshop. And then when I work with people that have a background in spirituality, then it's pretty simple to combine the two because they have both concepts. But it's actually even more interesting to work with people that have no background or even are not necessarily open to it. What I noticed is that there is a kind of aha moment for these people, because they come and they pay good money. Psychology is not cheap, and they pay good money so that you listen to them and you speak to them, and they have a problem, right? They were maybe ignoring their emotions for a long time, but now the emotionality is so big they can't function. That's often when they come. So I don't really care about sadness and so forth, but now it's so big I can't function. I don't really care about anxiety. I just want to do my thing in the world, but now it's so big I can't do my thing in the world because anxiety has been so big. And then if I was to direct them, for example, into the body and to try to feel the anxiety in the body, and from the body, from that pulsation, okay, so where do you feel anxious? And for some people it would be difficult to go from the mental side of anxiety, what the story of anxiety is, into the direct experience of anxiety right now. But once they do that shift and they're able to stay with the anxiety, normally it doesn't take more than a minute. They relax very much because anxiety is polarized by consciousness. And B, they're like, oh, I understand. This is what has been there somehow outside of my consciousness, and all I could see was the fruits of this. I could not see the tree and the roots and all of this. I would just get the fruits of anxiety. And what can you do? Instead of fighting the products of the factory and not being able to touch the factory, which is anyway you are the one. If you have anxiety, we produce it ourselves, right? And if we have anger, we produce it ourselves. But we lost contact with the factory that produces anger, anxiety, or sadness, or guilt, or fear. We only eat the products that we ourselves produce unconsciously. And once people from the outside, they come and they understand, oh, this is the factory. It has my picture everywhere. And that's me unconsciously creating all of it. There is an aha moment. There is a relief. There is a security. There is an ease. And it comes and goes. Consciousness and unconsciousness will continue to oscillate. But those who remain on the path of awareness, and they continue to do the inner work, both in sessions and in themselves, then yes, the healing comes, through the awareness, through the breaking of the emotion into its components. And, just for my heart and for the love that I have for people, it's extremely touching to see someone heal, somebody who might be for many months or years completely, or to a good degree, controlled by fear, guilt, anger, sadness, or lack of self-worth, and then they get it, that they themselves produce this. And they don't get it. It's not that they get it as an abstraction, that they understand an abstract mechanism. They get it as a direct experience. They see how contracting little mini muscles inside, saying yes to certain little thoughts out there, having certain views of the world, they produce their own suffering. You know, if my suffering, it has written on it, made in Uriel, and they're able to reduce and reduce and reduce that production and become happy, become confident, become free. It's extremely beautiful and touching.
So taking that question before last, if you can share with us, if you're comfortable, about the process that you have made yourself with that form of alchemizing of emotion, how, you know, in big line, how long does it take? What are the, I mean, in broad line, because probably in the workshop, it's 2 days, you can go in much greater depth, but what is the structure of such a process? And for you, what was the experience of that, or which emotions might have resisted a bit longer? And
Sure. Let me see. I'll give you, I think, a couple of examples so that it's more clear. So, for example, I had this, still have to a degree, but I had to a much more accentuated or more intense form, like a background of guilt. I would tend to feel just a little bit guilty kind of all the time. And I would feel quite guilty often in front of myself that I didn't do my best. And I would beat myself up. And in one of the retreats that I was making, I remember it was winter and it was snow and it was very beautiful. I was doing a special meditation with the Tara, for those who know, for 21 days to heal guilt. And I fell asleep one day. I was just going to rest a few minutes, but then I slept for much longer than I planned. And then I felt very guilty that I don't manage to do the program of the retreat of that day. And I felt, why did I sleep so much? And, what reason is there for such lack of self-control? And I was beating myself up. And I remember the moment. So this was a flash. Yeah. And that's why I take 2 examples, because it's normally not a flash, but this was a flash. So I remember the moment of walking in the snow. I would take my walk after eating, and it was pretty almost dark already. And it was like a flash of understanding of exactly these components of guilt, and that I'm guilty because I want to improve myself, but that I can improve myself without beating myself up, without bullying myself. And it was like a sharp and intense, clear understanding that at least in this field of life, when it comes to the spiritual practice and self-improvement acts and so forth, it was in a moment, and since then it was dramatically reduced. It's still there to a little degree. In other fields of life, there's still guilt, but it came as a direct understanding with the principle in a kind of timeless moment. So that was one fast process. And then to give you a longer and perhaps more complicated one, which is more like how it normally happens. So, like I said before, I get angry like our dad, which is quite a suppressed form of anger. Like he doesn't often express the anger explicitly, but more kind of indirectly, and a little bit of this rather avoiding conflict, which is something that I have taken, and which results in a lot of, if I look at my life, there was quite a lot of suppressed anger. And some years ago, we started to do a little bit of couple therapy, and I started to do a little bit of therapy myself, and had a very good therapist, and he helped me to see how angry I actually was. So this was the first, step one, was to move from an illusion of thinking that I'm not angry and other people are angry because I don't express my anger, into an understanding that, yeah, I'm quite angry. And I actually have an issue with anger. I have a problem with anger. Even I don't express it much, I don't rarely raise my voice at people or any of that, but there is still an anger issue. So the first step was to realize that my view of myself was illusionary. It was wrong. And that in reality, it is not true. It's not that I'm not angry, but I suppress the anger and I am actually angry. And then the second stage was to really come in contact with the anger and to really feel it and to catch it in the body. And then, I had a history of ulcers. And that was somehow there was no outlet in the social world for the anger, so the anger condensed all the way to the body to have ulcers. And then once I became aware of the anger, and again feeling it exactly in the stomach where the ulcers were, very often it's just there, sometimes in other areas of the abdomen. For me, that's where I feel my anger. But becoming conscious of it, I was able to, in time, it wasn't like it took a year or two, but to really heal the ulcer. And the process was to really allow the anger to surface. And I would just kind of do a little bit of like psychodrama with myself, just close the curtain and just let the anger express itself without making more of a drama out of it, without trying to over-express the anger, but also not cutting it in any way. So that was the second stage, was really to allow myself to be super angry. And I was trying also sometimes with people, but normally too much came when it was with people, and it wasn't integrated. So it was more like working and just surfacing the anger in myself. And then the third stage was to understand that I am that angry because I'm full of myself. I'm that angry because I have a great deal of self-importance, and I somehow consider myself more important than others. And when somebody stands in the way of what I perceive as a great goal and something much more important than whatever they have now, then I would get very angry. So something deeper surfaced. When the anger surfaced, why am I so angry? Well, because I'm quite insistent to get stuff my way. And then it was a double work, let's say, in the fourth stage of saying, well, I don't necessarily want to be, or when I really look at it, I don't actually see myself as more important than others. And this was just stuck inside of me. And then there was the work with the self-importance, and then the work with forgiveness. And all of it, in the process of a year or two, it's still ongoing, it's still something that I work with, it's not done. All of it, as it was unfolding, then the pain of the ulcers decreased and decreased and decreased. And all sorts of different kind of blockages, also in love relationships and all of that, dissolved, because there was like a background of anger, and underneath that a background of selfishness and of self-importance that was somehow determining all of that. Yeah, so it's still a work in progress. It's not done, but these were the stages.
Very fascinatingly put. And kind of as a last question, very often it is exactly in the interaction in a relationship which you would find one of the most direct trigger of emotion, and often you will find I can say a nuanced way of dealing with emotion in the majority of men and in the majority of women. You will find a great deal of suppression on one side, and a great deal of indulgence or a certain form of more of an explosive behavior. Majority of cases, and sometimes that's why we have all this jokes and so forth. In what way would you consider the wisdom of emotion relates specifically to the couple and to the interaction between the masculine and the feminine, and what is why it is so that there is such a suppression or indulgence or exaggeration or explosiveness on one of the sides? So what's the mechanism behind it, and what could be a possible viable solution for that?
Yeah, men receive the gift of being able to endure and move on And when things are very difficult, if you're in battle, if you are hunting, or if you are, it's not the time now. Even if you are hurt, even if you're injured, even if your friend just died next to you, you need to have the capacity to function. And so men have a greater capacity, arguably. I haven't looked at research when it comes to it, but at least the common belief is that men have a greater capacity to suppress, and it would make sense in this context that I said. But then that, which is, it is a gift. Suppression is not just bad. There is sometimes where you can't handle it. You can't digest it now. So you don't. You keep it for later. The thing is that later never comes. And then it's like, well, okay, then I never need to deal with my emotions. Great, because I'm a man. And I just go and I just never deal with my emotions. Yeah? Which, of course, then you don't have contact. If you continue to suppress all your emotions, you don't have intimacy, nor with yourself, nor with others, and there's no meaning. Yeah, you suppress the emotion, but you also suppress love, you also suppress the sense of meaning, you also suppress contact with yourself, you suppress contact with your beloved, but you're not in pain. And then you're like, yeah, screw life, I don't want life, I just don't want to be in pain. And here I have these 3 hobbies that I enjoy. I get some pleasure, I bring money home, finished. I'm a good guy. Yeah, and it's a very Neanderthal and retarded view of life. Yeah, a very, very 2-dimensional view of life. And yeah, and it is somehow the masculine challenge to suppress when it's time to suppress, and there's just some things that they are just too much. And then you just digest it in pieces, and then to return and to deal with it is you save it for later, and now is later. Now the big moment of crisis is gone and you can sit with your emotions. It's important for men to understand how rich and how wonderful the emotional life is, and not to be such sissies when it comes to some emotional pain. Sit with it. It's emotional pain. It's okay, The emotional pain itself, and this needs to be understood both for men and for women, the pain and the emotional suffering has a great transformative power. And if you contemplate your pain rather than indulge or suppress it, the suffering or the pain itself has a wisdom. If you contemplate it as it is without manipulating it, without reacting towards it, and it will actually transform you. But then we have this tendency of the ego, which is all about avoiding pain and chasing pleasure, which keeps the movement, the natural movement of suffering stuck. And it keeps, like, the movement of suffering wants to unfold and to transform, and then the ego says, I don't want suffering. And then these 2 vectors keep on colliding. Our life force disappears in this conflict. We are, broken in pieces and so forth. And the men need to use this gift of being able to observe lucidly in a non-reactive way, and to allow the emotional suffering to be without reacting to it. This is one of the best things that you can do in life, is to stop avoiding suffering. You avoid the causes of suffering. You avoid creating more suffering. But the suffering that is already produced, just sit and contemplate it. It will transform you. And if you do it correctly, you will grow tremendously by it. If you read a lot of spiritual practitioners, the practice it would be super hard. The practice of the 5 fires in India. Yeah, you have fires on all sides and the sun above you, midday India. You don't need fire to die of heat, right? And they sit there in the fire and they come out very transformed with a great spiritual power. Don't try it at home. But the idea is, if you just let your suffering be, you will transform and you will not need to suppress. And therefore you can be intimate and so forth. And the masculine challenge is to to really embrace the world of emotions and stay lucid. And then women have a much greater gift in connectivity. Yeah, at least this is the tantric view. They have a much greater gift of feeling, of being sensitive, and a woman would have to very, very well choose her partner and see if the partner will still be there, and then biologically through evolution it remained with this very profound sensitivity. It is supposed to feel a lot. A man is, in the societies of hunters and gatherers, a man would have to fight a lot and a woman would have to feel a lot. The women that would feel a lot would survive, and the men that would feel too much would not, right? So it's a woman's gift to be able to feel life so intensely and to feel connection, yeah, because emotions is, at least in our world, mostly about people and people, right? That's what you get emotional about. Yeah, some people get emotional about the climate or something, but that's still, humans creating it, right? As some people say. So mostly emotions are about people, and it is for women, or it is the gift of the feminine to feel emotions very intensely. But with it, the feminine temptation would be to lose responsibility in it, and to lose lucidity, and to use their emotional intensity as a manipulative factor. You see, if you take, for example, the victim mentality, if I am in pain, you don't do that. If I am in pain when you go, you don't go. I don't want you to go, so let me triple my pain. Yeah, I don't want you to go for 2 weeks. So I need to have a mega amount of pain. And this is done subconsciously. Like we said, the factory that produces the emotion of suffering is hidden. So subconsciously, I will triple the amount of pain because I really don't want you to go. Yeah. And then in all this unconsciousness, women will tend to create a lot of unnecessary emotional drama. And the feminine challenge would be to embrace this gift of sensitivity, of connectivity, but to assume responsibility for their emotions and to assimilate a lucidity, to be on top of the emotions and detached from them, and yet to experience them directly and authentically. And somehow in the couple relationship, men need to somehow deliver or infuse this gift of lucidity, of detachment, of being able to look at emotions in a calm way from a distance to his beloved. And a woman needs to teach the man to be sensitive and to really feel. And if I look at my relationships with women, this has been one of the most predominant gift that I received from the lovers that I have, is that they taught me to feel. And it's wonderful. Instead of just saying, okay, men are jerks and women are crazy, yeah, which is the stereotype. No, look, he's not just a jerk. He's able to look at emotions from a distance, study, extract. And she's not just crazy. She's actually feeling something that you don't feel. Extract and start to feel. So it is in understanding the complementarity of it and in embracing both genders and having a kind of androgynal, embracive, yet controlled and peaceful attitude towards emotions, that the synthesis, the healthy synthesis takes place.
There was a joke that a relationship is psychological. One is psycho and one is logical.
One is logical, yeah.
So, thank you very much for the insights, and I would say it was more than just a taste there for the coming workshop, but it already started to shed some light on these fundamental secrets and the hidden treasure that our emotions are, and the wisdom of how we deal them. So thank you very much for joining us again.
Pleasure. It's great.
And looking forward for the workshop.